Thanks for listening to The Leader, and thanks to the Society of Editors who have shortlisted us for News Podcast of the Year. We're very grateful. So don't miss an episode. Subscribe through your podcast provider to get our news, commentary and analysis every day at 4 p.m. From the Evening Standard in London, this is The Leader.
Evening Standard, it's your Evening Standard.
Hi, I'm David Marsland. Home Secretary Priti Patel announced plans for a new points-based immigration system.
Our system will be a British points-based system, one that works for our country, one that works for our labour market, one that works for our economy.
But what will it actually achieve? The Evening Standard's Jonathan Prynn takes a look and says many industries are worried. Also,
it's not a one-off. His targets have been, I think, 50% of living writers, directors and actors should be female, 20% of writers and directors should be of colour, and 25% of that for actors. And he seems to think he's going to hit those targets by next year.
Our arts editor, Nancy Durrant, says Rufus Norris has confirmed he'll stay as the National Theatre's artistic director for another 5 years. We also look at this year's programme. Will there ever be another Warhorse? Taken from the Evening Standard's editorial column, this is The Leader. For the whole thing, pick up the newspaper or head to standard.co.uk/comment. In a moment, what's in the government's immigration plan? For Priti Patel, it's about delivering the people's priorities.
And with that, we are delivering on our points-based immigration system. This system will effectively mean that for the first time in decades, the British government will be in control of its own immigration policy and its system, where we will be able to bring the brightest and the best, people that can contribute to our economy and our country.
Plans for a new immigration system would end free movement and introduce from January 1st next year a points system. Skilled workers will need 70 points to get a visa, and they're awarded for things such as having a job offer from an approved sponsor, that's worth 20, an offer at a required skill level, another 20, and ability to speak English to a certain level, that's worth 10 points. There are salary thresholds, 25,600 for those coming with a job offer, 20,480 for those with an offer from an occupation on the government shortage list. The Home Office says it's firm and fair. Our editorial column sees problems.
You won't hear it from ministers, but let's remember that immigration is not a problem, but a solution. Indeed, the many ministers in this government who come from a minority ethnic background are the best advertisement for our open society. They should know that an economy with near full employment, by definition, does not have a large pool of unemployed people sitting at home waiting for work. So either the workers must come from elsewhere, or there will be labour shortages that lead to higher prices for consumers and a less successful economy. So how should we judge the government's new immigration plans? The key policy is the end to European free movement, and the real test for an employment visa is the salary threshold. We should be highly sceptical that a committee of so-called government experts will be able to set that threshold with any meaningful assessment of the needs of the economy. How is government supposed to work out the needs of the burgeoning gig economy? A decade ago, no department anticipated it might even exist. So should we be worried about the damage these plans will do? No, because the points system will be quickly gamed. We are an open society and economy, and it will take more than a closed mind in Whitehall to shut it down.
Well, the Evening Standard's Jonathan Prynn's covering the story. Jonathan, what are the big changes in the system?
Well, the system is essentially an Australian-style points-based system, which applicants to emigrate into the UK will have to meet a minimum of 70 points. You get awarded a certain number of points for different characteristics. If you've got a job sponsor, if you're young, if your job is over a certain salary threshold. These all accumulate points, and then until you hit the magic 70, which gets you the golden tickets coming to the country and take up employment.
But as our editorial column says, those salary thresholds are very important, and yet do we know if they reflect what salaries are in the UK today with our gig economy? Do they know how much an Uber driver should be getting, for example?
That's a really good point. Our economy is, especially in London, is the labour market is unrecognisable from a decade ago. The gig economy has changed the face of the labour market dramatically. So the thought that a committee of civil servants can pick a number at random to meet the skills shortages in the UK with the correct number of immigrants is well, it seems a long stretch, but we'll see.
So let's talk through some of the numbers, because that's what people in government love doing, is talking through some of the numbers. How is this going to change the face of immigration in the UK? Will fewer people be coming here?
Inevitably, there will be fewer people coming in, particularly from the European Union, where obviously there's been unfettered access for workers for many years now, since the free labour market or free movement was introduced. So that's probably going to be the big difference. I mean, Priti Patel has said her aim is not to bring about the end of the Polish builder, and we should bear in mind also that there are 3.2 million EU citizens with settled status already in the UK. So there'll be a big pool of foreign workers who will, or foreign-born workers who will remain here. However, I think that influx of vast numbers or very substantial numbers of workers particularly from Eastern Europe, but also from Southern Europe, and who we're so familiar with in London in particular, in our restaurants, in the care homes, in the health sector, in the construction sector, that influx will dry up. There's no question about it. A lot of those jobs are well below the threshold that the government has decided they want people to meet to accumulate these points. So it will be a very different world, and I think the consequences could be profound and quite difficult to predict.
Yeah, are areas like construction and hospitality, are they concerned about this?
They're deeply concerned. Health and care sectors in particular, massively reliant on what could be described as low-skilled or unskilled labour, although there's a big dispute about that terminology. Same in the hospitality sector. In London, some estimates have suggested that as much as 3/4 of waiting staff are from EU countries. So replacing those to keep the restaurants open and staffed, and the kitchens full, is going to be very, very difficult. I think there's also a worry that the big events that we love so much, the big summer events, Wimbledon, Chelsea Flower Show, all those sorts of things, which again, in catering terms, are very, very reliant on European labour. I mean, how they're going to cope with that remains to be seen as well.
Next.
At the beginning, with Rufus Norris, people were a bit like, what is he doing? He changed things so dramatically. He wasn't doing any of the old white men. Everything was very different. He's really, really done some great stuff, actually. I think he sort of pulled it together.
The Evening Standard's arts editor Nancy Durrant takes a look at the future of the National Theatre. The National Theatre's announced its new programme, with highlights including Small Island returning after last year's sellout run. They've also confirmed Rufus Norris will remain as artistic director for another 5 years, and he's promising to hit diversity targets by next year. Well, the Evening Standard's new arts editor Nancy Durrant is here. Nancy, when a new programme's launched, the first really important question you have to ask is it exciting?
Yeah, I think it sort of is. I mean, there's always some things you just think, What is that? I've never seen that before. The Corn is Green, for example, would be the closest thing to that I've seen so far today. It's a Welsh 1930s classic. It is unlikely to be that familiar to British audiences, I think. It's about an English school teacher in a Welsh mining town. There's a slight sort of goodbye Mr. Chips feel about it, but no doubt none the worse for that. But there are some things on this programme that I am super keen to see. Kristen Scott Thomas, obviously.
Yeah.
She's in Fedra.
Her first time, you said?
Her first time at the National Theatre, which seems completely mad. She's never trod those boards, and that's really exciting, I think. And then Standing at the Sky's Edge, which is a musical that was a co-production with the Sheffield Theatres and has the music of Richard Hawley, is absolutely gorgeous. I went to see that in Sheffield last year. It's so nice. I'm so pleased that it's transferring to the National because it's a perfect space for it. It's big. It's got an amazing set. The music is obviously great. And it's just such a lovely story. And I think one of the things about it that is exciting is that it sort of feeds into something that I think we'll talk about in a bit, which is Rufus Norris's diversity agenda. But it's set in the Sheffield housing estate of Park Hill across 3 generations of families. And so it starts with a working class story. And I think that is really, actually, that's something that we don't see so much on stages generally these days, but also we don't see it without it being all about misery. It's so nice. I'm so pleased. I'm really thrilled.
As you mentioned there, Rufus Norris, who has confirmed today that he's going to remain as artistic director for another 5 years.
More years.
There was a bit of a will he, won't he last year, but he's confirmed he's going to go ahead with this. Now, 5 years ago, he said his main thing was to increase diversity in theatre audiences at the National Theatre. Mm-hmm. Has he done that?
Do you know what? I think he has. It's really exciting. I recently went to see Inuit Ellam's Biafran War set version of Chekhov's Three Sisters, which was a huge breath of fresh air, I have to say. But also the audience was so mixed. It had so many people of colour in it, and it's not a one-off. His targets have been, I think, 50% of living writers, directors and actors should be female, 20% of writers and directors should be of colour, and 25% of that for actors. And he seems to think he's going to hit those targets by next year, and having, seen most of what's been on the stage over the last few years, that wouldn't surprise me, actually.
Yeah, I'm bringing someone like Kristen Scott Thomas.
Yeah, I mean, you'll still get all the people who were coming before to go, well, actually, good God, Norman, can you believe she's never been there before? We must go. That's the thing. He's got a really good eye, I think, or he's developed a really good eye for sort of strategic programming. This director here will bring in these kind of people, this story will bring in these kind of people, this actor. So, for example, Lynette Linton, who is now the new, not that new, but relatively new artistic director of The Bush, she is going to be doing a play called Blues for an Alabama Sky, and that will star Giles Terera, who was Aaron Burr in Hamilton, which will bring in another whole slice of people, people who don't normally go to the National Theatre, but were prepared to shell out £100 or more for a ticket to Hamilton because it was Hamilton.
That's kind of how that ecosystem works. You bring people in to see a blockbuster like Hamilton, and then they say, I'd quite like to see the other actors in these kinds of things. Exactly. And that's how you regenerate theatre. There's a strategy in the programme, isn't there? If you look at it, you can see things coming out, and also their own homegrown successes. Small Island's coming back as a flagship.
I know, that's really fantastic. I mean, it was a great. It's a bit long. They're always a bit long. Everything's a bit long.
Everything's long these days.
But it was really fantastic, wonderful timing, actually, because it was just after the Long Song had just been on television. Everyone was interested in Andrea Levy. And then, of course, tragically, she died. And so now people are even more interested to see that work because they know that they're not going to get another chance.
So success generates success.
Success generates
We're
success.
seeing that maybe over the next 5 years.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think people sort of, and I probably was one of them, I think at the beginning with Rufus Norris, people were a bit like, what is he doing? He changed things so dramatically. He wasn't doing any of the, the old white men. Everything was very different. And some of it was genuinely dreadful. I mean, there were. I think people remember the duds, don't they? You remember when you've seen something that was absolutely terrible. Wonder.Land was just abject. There was that awful thing about St. George and the Dragon, which was definitely one of the worst things I've ever seen. And not very many people liked his Macbeth. I was one of them. Didn't like that either. But there have been triumphs. Small Island, as you say, which is coming back. Nine Night, which won awards, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, Barbershop Chronicles, Angels in America went to New York, Lehman Trilogy went to the West End, went to New York, is now going to Amsterdam, is going somewhere else, It's like, Follies came back twice. He's really, really done some great stuff, actually. I think he sort of pulled it together. Nobody gets it right first time around.
And that's The Leader. We have loads of arts and news coverage every day at 4 p.m. Subscribe to make sure you don't miss out.